The Buffalo Bills defensive line is the key to beating the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. I'm going to break that down for you and more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Crossover Thursday, and Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. Prize Picks, run your game.
It is Thursday here on the Locked On Network, and you know what that means. It is time for a crossover, a Thursday night football matchup between AFC East rivals. I'm Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, joined by Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. This crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Nothing like a high stakes AFC East matchup. Joe, we talk daily. We do NFL scouting together, but good to see you back on our twice, sometimes three times annual crossovers here with Locked On Bills and Locked On Dolphins, respectively.
Yeah, the Bills and Dolphins get to play the second game of the season for themselves pretty quickly here. Quick turnaround after week one, and I think both teams are probably quite happy to be entering this game 1-0, both coming from behind to win those football games, and obviously a lot at stake here early in the season.
So let's get into Buffalo, who has some new. They have some injuries. From your perspective, what's the biggest thing right now with the Bills?
That's probably Josh Allen's left hand. Obviously, Sean McDermott came out and said that he's been cleared to practice. He's been cleared to play in the game. That doesn't mean there's not something wrong with his hand. Clearly there is. He's practicing with a glove. He's got buddy tape on a couple of fingers, and you just kind of wonder how that's going to impact things. Now, I guess the good news for the Bills is that it probably doesn't affect his ability to just throw the football, but that's not all that there is to Josh Allen, right? I think we all understand the dual threat nature of how he plays the game, and it's not just running the ball and him using that offhand as a part of his skill set, but there's a lot of ball handling and play fakes and things that Josh does with his sleight of hand. That's an important part of how he runs the offense. And so how do the Bills have to work around that injured left hand, whatever the extent of the deal is? I'm sure Josh is going to play. It's just going to be a matter of how limiting is it in terms of the overall game that Josh Allen likes to typically play.
So for Dolphins fans who didn't catch the game on Sunday, this happened on the latest Superman leap into the end zone when he came down. Is that correct? It feels like he's got three of those Air Jordan touchdowns every season, but that's when that happened.
Yeah, he's building the hurdle highlight reel, jumping over Budda Baker into the end zone. And when he came down, his elbow landed on his left hand and was in some discomfort. You saw he finished the game, but even the handoffs that he had later on, you could tell he kind of had to compensate for that. And of course, immediately after the injury, a lot of swelling. Hopefully the swelling goes down throughout the course of the week, but it's definitely something that he's going to have to deal with in this game.
So what else? I know Taron Johnson's been a very impactful player for Buffalo, plays a key role in that nickel. Sounds like he's been confirmed out already with a forearm injury as well.
Yeah, confirmed out for the game. And obviously Taron Johnson, really good slot player, second team All-Pro last season. An important player, not just because he's a good player, but structurally how the Bills play defense. They play a base 4-2. They play him 100% of snaps as a nickel defender. They don't really play three linebackers. And I think you saw, he went out early in the game. I think he played 7 snaps, and then he was injured, forearm injury. And the Bills really struggled early against Arizona. And I think part of that was figuring out how to play without Taron Johnson. They just weren't as crisp with their coverage rotations and the timing of some of their pressure looks. That type of stuff was off. And I think that speaks to Taron Johnson's impact on the team. But then Cam Lewis, who's in his 5th year on the team, just been around for a long time as like a Swiss Army knife defensive back. He came in and in the second half against Arizona, I would say he was very, very impactful. And so the question is, can he parlay that into this matchup? And of course, Miami stresses you in really unique ways. And so the Bills are going to rely a lot on Cam Lewis. And then, I know, Matt, in terms of Miami, they're going to play a lot of 2 backs. They're going to play multiple tight ends. And the Bills are not going to play multiple linebackers. They're not going to play 3 linebackers. They're more likely to lean into dime defense, right? They'll bring in that third safety. That's what they did against Arizona. That's what they did last year. I anticipate that's what they'd like to do structurally. And I think that's a lot tougher when you don't have Taron Johnson in the mix.
So any finishing touches on injuries? And I'd love to hear from you as far as what was different with Buffalo, 1 game sample size against Arizona, but Joe Brady's impression on the offense. Think about the defense with some of the personnel changes that have happened with kind of a reworked kind of middle core with obviously Matt Milano out, with Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp now as the starting safeties of this football team. Each side of the ball, any other injuries? And then beyond that, like, what were your impressions of what was new and what was old with Buffalo and how they played against Arizona?
Yeah, I think the only other notable injury would be DeJuan Smoot. He's the 4th defensive end. He's out for the game. So the Bills will be without him. I think everyone else should be good to go for Thursday night. In terms of just kind of some impressions on the newness and the style of this football team, starting on the offensive side of the football, you saw the Bills want to run the ball. I think that's a big part of what this team wants to be. They ran the ball really well last year, and I think they want to build upon that. They have a little bit more depth in the backfield with the drafting of Ray Davis, and Connor McGovern goes from left guard to center. David Edwards now the starter at left guard, and they've really leaned into the athleticism of the tackles. Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins are really dynamic athletes at tackle, and they pull those guys like crazy, try to get them front side and leading and clearing lanes for James Cook. And so the Bills ran the ball 75% of the time on first down. They want to run the football. I think that's going to be a big part of who they are all season long. Then the passing game is very different, right? Stephon Diggs not around. Gabe Davis not around. I think it's like a crazy percentage of Josh Allen's targets from last year is not around. And in week 1, Arizona, I think, had the same thought everybody did. Well, they're going to throw the ball to Dalton Kincaid all the time. And Arizona keyed in on Dalton Kincaid very, very heavily in that game. And so the mantra of this offense is everybody eats, right? That's the whole design, is that it's not about any one player in terms of a weapon. It's, okay, yeah, you want to take something away. We got other players. Now, it's not like this inventory of elite players, but a lot of solid players that play complementary roles that allow the Bills to attack defenses differently, probably game plan specific and contingent on who the opposing team wants to try to take away. And you saw them lean into Keon Coleman, lean into Khalil Shakir at times in this game, lean into some of their misdirection stuff to open up the middle of the field, right? I think that's what they really want to be able to do, is stress the middle of the field. And as they do that, they've got the bodies to win on the outside in terms of bigger players to work the perimeter. And I think you saw that against Arizona really come to fruition. On the defensive side of the football, Bobby Babich, who's been with Sean McDermott for a long time, it gets a chance to run the defense now as a coordinator and play caller. And man, it's really different watching this defense, because I mean, it's been such a staple of guys for so long in the secondary. It really kind of hit me hard. I was watching the All-22 against the Cardinals. I'm like, man, there's no Trey White, there's no Jordan Poyer, there's no Micah Hyde back there, and then Taron Johnson goes down. You're like, that guy's usually around. There's no Milano. I'm like, holy smokes, who are these players? But did you have to Google the R-Lads at any point? I had to do that one time doing my Dolphins. I'm like, oh, who's wearing that number now? Like, I can't remember. Right, and then the couple of them change numbers. Like, it's definitely different. So it's I think structurally they want to be the same type of defense that they've been playing, a lot of cover 3, a lot of quarters, zone heavy, force you to be disciplined. But it's just really unique watching the defense right now. I think a lot of what they need to be successful is winning up front with their defensive line, where I think you do have a lot of the more typical names that you're used to seeing up front. And Rousseau obviously had a huge game against Arizona, and Von Miller was very good against Arizona as well after a dreadful season last year coming off of the ACL. So the front looks strong. It's just a matter of the back 7, and then a back 7 that doesn't have the mainstays and Matt Milano and Taron Johnson when you're and barking upon this transition, you certainly wanted to have those guys on the field to help with some of the newness around them. But the outside pair of corners in Benford and Douglas, I think they're a strong group altogether. It's a good duo. Interesting matchup against Miami, and then of course with all the other new pieces in that back seven, it's kind of a work in progress.
There's a lot of storylines for this game, some interesting parallels with things that you talked about with things Miami saw some of against Jacksonville that we're going to dive into. Miami has their own injuries to figure out. There's the Jordan Poyer, Saron Neal revenge game element of this. Feels like these teams have the Mike White revenge game. Not that he's going to play, but the impact. Seems like these teams always have an opportunity to exchange a couple players back and forth each offseason. So lots more to get into here on this crossover Thursday. Dolphins, Bills, Thursday Night Football. We're continuing our look at that coming your way next. Make sure you stick with us. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day food, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a play. There's a bunch of great options where I'm from, Joe. A lot of convenience store opportunities. Everybody knows about my Avid energy drink. If you're a Locked On NFL scouting listener, I take advantage of DoorDash between the kids and getting the kids to school. And now that it's back to school, things get a little crazy. So not only just on game day, but I like having something waiting for me in the front porch when I get back from doing kid drop-offs too, if it's not along the way on the route. And DoorDash definitely has the opportunity for you to make sure all of your appetite, cravings, game day rituals, it's all there for you. You can use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. This is a limited time offer. Terms do apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol only available in select markets. When you leave the front door, Joe, do you have a like a final check?
Yeah, keys, wallet, cell phone.
Yeah, hair.
Well,
you got to make sure the hair looks good.
Got to make sure the hair looks good,
you
baby.
For the beard, but like it is phone, wallet, keys, hair, good. If you are losing your hair, though, you may not feel so confident when you step outside your door, and not everybody can rock a bald dome like Joe Marino. So if you want to get your confidence back and restore your hair, you can do so with Hims. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work, all from the comfort of your couch. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with doctor-trusted treatment options and clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil that can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. They offer personalized chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatment options so you can find what works best for you. And for full transparency, I've been on a hair treatment plan for about 3 years now. And I look back at pictures of myself. Joe, you're at my wedding. You remember what the haircut was like at the wedding, right?
Yeah.
A little different vibe.
You've upgraded, Kyle Krabs.
We've upgraded, and the hair treatment, the personalized hair treatment plan was a part of that journey for me. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/LockedOnNFL. That's HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL for your personalized hair treatment options. HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. What do you want to know about the mind Dolphins?
Well, I think it's probably appropriate to start with any injury concerns. I know both the primary running backs, Achane and Mostert, didn't practice Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
What can you tell us there and any other injuries that we need to be aware of?
So as far as other injuries, the only other player with anything of seemingly real significance is Liam Eichenberg, who was limited. Now they did not practice on Monday, and they held a walkthrough on Tuesday. So we're recording on Wednesday, right around when our teams are getting ready to practice. Mm-hmm. So by the time you guys catch the crossover, the injury report will be out as far as the full determinations for the game and players that are out. And then obviously guys that are questionable, you'll make the designation 90 minutes before kickoff. I don't expect that you'll have an issue with Liam Eichenberg. The Dolphins with the running back situation, it is very interesting. Now, 4th round pick Jalen Wright was a healthy inactive for week 1. And they cited special teams. They cited games plan specific type of things. Devon Achane, if he's not able to go, would be a pretty significant loss because they used him as the third option in the passing game. And there were some manufactured touches there, getting the ball quickly into his hands on the perimeter. They did a lot of that heavy lifting last year with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Seems like they want to go use those guys a little bit more into route distribution and then use a guy like him who has the same explosiveness to his game as the guy at the line of scrimmage to help to offset pass rush. And that was a big part of the plan against Jacksonville was they had 3 defensive linemen that created big time problems. And I think with Buffalo, if Von Miller's playing well, and if Greg Rousseau plays the way he's capable of playing, and Oliver plays well, there's some similar problems that Miami's going to have to negotiate. How much do they lean into that? That may be dependent on if Devon Achane can go. Miami being on a short week, it's impossible to say how they may handle it versus how they may handle other players. I was a little surprised that Jalen Ramsey last week didn't practice for 3 weeks, did the walkthrough on Friday, and then was able to go in the game. Usually they shut those guys down. So because it's a short week, I do think it does create a little bit of an element of unknown that by the time everybody catches the crossover, Miami may have made this more simple. The good news for them, if that's the case, I thought their running game actually caught some fire late against Jacksonville with Jeff Wilson in the game using some different run concepts. They wanted to try to capture the edge against Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, but their skill players trying to block those guys created a lot of problems. So you had a lot of negative or 0-yard gains on first down early in the game, and then Miami fell behind on the scoreboard. They kind of got away from trying to capture the run. Once they climbed back into the game, they ran some more 21, 22 with power concepts and ran downhill and actually found some success against Jacksonville in doing that. And if Achane can't go, I would assume that package, Jalen Wright's going to be dressing, and I would assume that package between Jalen Wright and Jeff Wilson is a little bit bigger of the piece of the puzzle for them offensively.
Kyle, there's things I want to ask you offensively and defensively, but I think there's more of a theme that I want to kind of dive into with Miami and the team that they're trying to become. I feel like there's been a lot of intentionality with maybe the player personnel acquisition that they've made recently and trying to win the AFC East, right? And go on a deeper playoff run, things that they've been trying to achieve for a number of years. What are your prevailing thoughts based on the roster construction and the decisions that they've made this offseason, coupled with what they showed against Jacksonville to kind of be on the ropes of the game getting away, but making a big-time game-changing play, the script changing, they take control of a football game? It really kind of signifies to me maybe this edge that Miami's trying to build within their operation.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that Jalen Ramsey was the one who had the big rally in the locker room after the game because he's been there, done that. He's been a leader. He's been a leader on a championship program. The leadership of Calais Campbell. Now, I think things got a little bit more complicated on Sunday because of the Tyreek Hill traffic incident, which is a really unfortunate situation. And it felt like there were some players on the team who started really sluggish, and you don't know how much of that is or is not because of that. But Mike McDaniel said, this is a game we don't win last year. And I thought that was a very powerful statement by him to the point that you're making about bringing in Calais Campbell, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, obviously with the experience that he has, bringing in Jordan Poyer, guys that have been on successful programs and don't blink. And Miami's had their successes in falling behind early in games. Last year, they were down 14 to Jacksonville or to Carolina, another Big Cat team, excuse me. They fell behind in 2022 to Baltimore and came back 21 points in the fourth quarter. They were down 14 to Detroit in 2022 and came back. So they've done this before, but for it to be tough and gritty and ugly and to win ugly in the manner in which they did, I think does have a little bit of a different tone to it. And I thought they left a lot of plays out there, especially in the first half, as far as the little things. Oh, the tight end in the slot, getting up and chasing the backside safety, that if you set that block, you have a 70-yard explosive play touchdown, but you don't get up on there, so it's only 30 yards, and then you don't score on the drive and you turn it over on downs. A little bit of a late protection switch that you see late, and Tua has to protect himself from the throw, and it forces a misconnection down the field for what would have been a 50-yard touchdown pass. So like they had those missed assignments where I think last year some of those things would have snowballed, but they did, to your point, kind of ride out the storm and make a pivotal play. And I love that it was a young player in Javon Holland who made the critical play that helped turn the game. And then they had a one score touchdown on the following play.
Feels like offensive line's always a big talking point with the Dolphins. Want to hear from you on what your concern level is. Are these concerns overblown, or do you see some limiting factors with this offensive line, particularly at the guard spots?
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're going to come out and be more talented than anybody that they're lining up across from, probably on any given week at the guard spot. I thought Aaron Brewer was pretty darn good at center. And the Dolphins, with how they set up their quick perimeter screen, and they forced Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker to retrace their steps and get back outside the numbers so frequently early in the game. Miami actually, when they did some of their drop back passing stuff, I thought they left their tackles on islands more than what I expected that they would. And Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson were two of the better performers in the game as individual efforts for Miami. So I think it all ties together. The question is, as the season gets deeper, does the talent disparity with what you have at the other spots on the interior line catch up to you as other teams start to get privy and have answers for the challenges that you present? I think for a week 2 matchup, I think Miami probably has enough new wrinkles where they feel good about their chances to offset any talent advantages. They did get a lot of doubles as a result on the inside against the guys on the interior. Eric Armstead had a lot of extra attention. But I think it's more of a long-term question unless the game script gets off the rails. And I think that's what you saw in week 4 when these teams played last year. So they kind of went blow for blow, and then Buffalo kept going, and Miami kind of stopped, and then it really got away from them. And in instances like that, Mike McDaniel will get more aggressive earlier to try to chase the game back down. And if it works, great. But if it doesn't, then things get really ugly, and that's how you lose 48-20. Now, we have keys to victory. Anything else that you have, we can get on the other side of the break. But we're going to jump to break real quick. Make sure you stick with us as we get into keys to victory for Thursday Night Football. Bills at Dolphins, week 2. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, but right now we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You need a YouTube TV base plan, and you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. And if you're a Bills or Dolphins fan, this is a great week to have Sunday Ticket because your team isn't occupying the 1 o'clock or the 4 o'clock slate. So there you go. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Did I cut you off on anything you wanted to ask? I feel like we didn't really get to the Dolphins defense at all.
Yeah, but that's what I've reconciled that already in my head because I'm going to bake it into one of my keys to victory, and I'm hopeful to get a response out of you through that. So we're going to be all right here, Kyle Craft.
Let's start there. Give me your 3 primary keys to victory.
My 3 primary keys to victory for the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night is, number 1, the defensive line has to win. It has to be a dominant performance by the Bills up front. And I do have a level of concern. I mean, not a level of concern. I have a massive level of concern with the mismatches that Miami presents with their skill players. But it's that coupled with how I think the Bills will choose to match personnel with their back 7 leaning into dime, right? I think it's either going to be Jamarcus Ingram, that's who it was last week, or Mike Edwards potentially as that third safety that's going to play a decent amount, in addition to a guy like Dorian Williams having to fill in for Matt Milano. And so while you have some concerns about your back end and matching up with, the most explosive mix of skill players in the league, how do you overcome that? Your defensive line has got to dominate up front, and you have Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones and Greg Rousseau and Von Miller and Epinesa. These players have to be the catalysts up front, especially when you feel like you have some matchup opportunities that you can win with your talent up front. So number 1 is very clearly to me the defensive line disrupting the run game, getting quick pressure on Tua. Number 2 for me is the Bills want to be this good rushing offense that has to show up in this game. And I know that Jacksonville was able to have a little bit of success running the football. I understand there's probably some alignment issues, week one type stuff, but the Bills need to be able to move bodies out of the way and be a physical rushing offense on Thursday night. For as much as we think about both of these as very high-scoring offenses and what they're capable of, I think the recipe for Buffalo has got to be staying committed to that run game and seeing what type of opportunities you can gain against Miami in their run defense. And number three, and this is kind of where I think it sets you up to kind of respond back on the last question that I had for the last segment, is I think the Bills have to find ways to stress the newness of Miami's defense. It's their third defensive coordinator in 3 years, and there's new pieces on all three levels, whether that's Calais Campbell up front, Jordan Brooks at linebacker, Kendall Fuller at corner, Jordan Poyer at safety. How do you stress that, right? I think misdirection's a way to do that. I think you can mix in tempo. I don't think you want to live in tempo. I mean, I know it's a night game, so you don't have the typical heat dynamics of a 1 o'clock afternoon kick in Miami, but it's going to be humid, right? It's a different level of humidity that the Bills are obviously not dealing with. So I don't think you want to be too crazy with tempo, but I think you want to kind of figure out your opportunities to mix in tempo to see if you can stress that communication and their ability to adjust and play on the fly. And the last thing I would say in terms of how can you stress the newness of the Miami defense is formational width. The Bills have been leaning into tighter formations, and I think bunch sets, playing things a little bit closer, whether they're going to play man, you can get some natural rubs, or if they're going to play zone, I think you kind of stress that communication because of how guys are going to release in the routes. I think that's where Buffalo has to find an edge is how can you challenge some of those new dynamics for Miami on the defense. And so my question, I guess, was, what have you learned? What does this defense want to be under Anthony Weaver and with their new mix of personnel?
So I had shared this post. You're familiar with Chris Vasseur, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So Coach Vass, if you're not familiar, he's a defensive consultant, former high school coach, does a lot of amazing defensive football online content that helps make you a smarter fan of the game if you're into kind of the mechanics of how stuff works. He put out the post, and I'm going to read you the post to answer what is the identity of the Dolphins defense after week one. This is from Chris Vasseur, and Dolphins fans heard this on Tuesday, so my apologies for hearing it again. Watching Dolphins defensive all 22, they're going to be fun this year to watch schematically. They had multiple 1-2 high disguise structures, different variations of 3 buzz, all-out 0 blitzes, zone quarters and half combos by formation, 3 cloud, multiple 2-deep corner sims, a variation of spike 1 rat, 3 and 2 deep fire zones, different variations of cover 3, both zone and match, and even bare fronts and tilt 6-1 looks. More looks in one game than most teams will run in a complete season, all in game one. I'd say more different types of schemes than both the Flores and Fangio stuff combined.
Kitchen sink.
They kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I think for a game like Buffalo, I think your back seven needs to be able to be a little bit more reactive. Does that mean more man coverage, knowing full well what playing man coverage against Josh Allen can do? Does that mean more man with pressure to try to speed up the process and try to stick to receivers earlier while Buffalo's still in that process of figuring out, hey, who are going to be the man beaters for us with consistency? I think Miami has different skill sets in the secondary that they can play if they choose to do matchups. You can put Jalen Ramsey on Dalton Kincaid. Are you going to put Kendall Fuller on Khalil Shakir if you play man coverage? And we're going to try to pressure. I think Miami is a little bit more athletic with Jordan Brooks versus Jerome Baker as the other stack linebacker for them. I think that's a matchup that's really interesting. But those linebackers didn't necessarily play off of each other very well in week one against Jacksonville. Jacksonville averaged 6.5 yards per carry on 1st and 10. And
all Joe Brady needs to hear, baby, with a 75% run.
And I know Buffalo's at 4.8. Right. And they ran the ball heavy on first down. Now, some of that, there was 2 explosive plays where 2 explosive runs, I should say, where Jacksonville was backed up inside their own 10-yard line. And the integrity of the fits, it looked like they were going to run an A-gap twist exchange with the 2 stack linebackers because the defensive line fanned out. And David Long works to cross Mitch Morse's face, but then sees all the space and he peels back and goes into the original gap that he was in. And Jordan Brooks was letting David Long go first. And he's like, all right, he's going to go across his face. I'm going to take the other A gap. And they both end up in the same A gap. And Tank Bigsby makes a 10-degree adjustment and he's out the A gap with all the downhill momentum in the world for a 26-yard gain. Like little things like that. That's one of the keys to victory for me is better formation on the second level defensively. And then the other defensive key to victory is what is your plan to match personnel? And that kind of folds into your question with what your third key to victory was. If I'm Miami, I would probably try early to play some more pressure and man looks in those instances and try to find the right personnel, and then put the onus on Josh and the Bills offense to figure out, okay, who's going to be the guy that wins their one-on-one matchup with consistency in this game while it is still so new? And if we don't get that, what answers can we find to create rubs and then create openings? So I think that for me is part of the chess match. Now, Miami offensively, my big key to victory is Buffalo needs to earn the right to rush the passer. And what I mean by that is the Dolphins on 1st and 10 against Jacksonville averaged 2.7 yards per carry. They were not very successful. And as I said, as this game got deeper on, they found with the 12 and the 21 and the 22 personnels that they could come in and they could run downhill and they could challenge you. And if Buffalo's going to have two linebackers on the field and they're going to have a 4-2 base and they're going to have somebody who's not their primary nickel as the seventh man in the box, whether that's a safety or a defensive back, I would try to play those heavy structures on 1st and 10 and present that challenge and try to get ahead of the sticks. I lost count of the times you looked up the Dolphins were at 2nd and 11, 3rd and 9. And you can't live like that with consistency against Buffalo. So I think the big challenge for Mike McDaniel, the game that I thought they did the best job of that against Buffalo in recent memory was the second game in 2022, where Buffalo won on the walk-off field goal, 32-29, mm-hmm. and Miami had some explosive runs early. They found ways to put those apex defenders in key spots in the run game. And for Miami, you're not just going to line up and do cloud of dust, but if you're going to run two-back power with two tight ends and create more gaps, and you can use your tight end motions to create more folds and guys like you're talking about with what the Bills do with Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown and flip guys to the formational strength versus being lined up on the backside pre-snap, that robustness of the running game and getting better returns on 1st and 10, I think is a critical key to victory that then gives Miami the luxury when they're in 2nd and mid or 2nd and short to then get into, hey, we have our mismatches that we think that we can create in the passing game, and we're going to naturally slow down the Bills' running game.
It's going to be interesting, man. I think both rosters with a level of transition, a lot of new faces that are part of the team, a lot of familiar faces that aren't. And we get the latest edition of Bills Dolphins early in the season. We're going to be done playing each other. Was it week 9?
No,
it's
what
crazy.
A shame. What a shame.
Crazy. It's crazy.
We done my first week of November with each other.
Right. Instead of finishing the season, right?
Hey, maybe we could get a late. I'd take a third one if it was in late January.
I think anybody would, right? Let's play again in January.
Rivalries are more fun when they're meaningful, and they're only meaningful when both teams are winning. So this head-to-head has been a very sore spot for a lot of Dolphins fans for a long time. Tua was asked about it, and he said, "This year's this year, brother." And he kind of laughed at himself at the podium. He said, "This is a very political answer." And knowing how Mike McDaniel likes to confront narratives head on, I have to imagine this has been a big talking point for Miami this week. And we'll see what they do with that opportunity with critical players who were here last year for the Week 18 game that decided the division, but a lot of names that also weren't. And how do you get those guys galvanized in that too is a really interesting storyline as well.
And of course, Sean McDermott was asked the same thing. Hey, there's been a lot of success against Miami. And he says, none of that matters for this game.
Yep.
So
it's a healthy reminder for those of us who are superstitious, right?
There's nothing you can do, folks.
I
tell Locked On Bills listeners all the time that if my words and actions had the ability to affect the outcome of Buffalo Bills games, there'd be a trophy case slam full of Lombardis at one Bills drive. But as Dolphins fans will remind Bills fans, There's not any.
Oh, what a great sign off for us here. Crossover Thursday, Dolphins, Bills. Make sure you check out Locked On Bills for all of your Bills needs after the game and all season long. Locked On Dolphins, we will have you covered because it is your teams every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. We hope you guys enjoyed this crossover. Make it a great rest of your day. That is it for us. We are out of here.